It turns out the Super Bowl audience was the largest ever, and the NFL kept rolling with the draft on TV and radio.
All right, listen, I'm sorry. This one I do not get, guys. I don't get it. Michael Mayer's a terrific player, don't get me wrong. Tight end, they traded away Darren Waller. I understand this. But that is nowhere near what the importance should be for the Las Vegas Raiders here, Mike.
Chris Carlin, I agree with you 1,000%.
And Andrew, we'll talk NFL, ESPN, MLB, NASCAR, and more on the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. John's in New York on location. John, what are you doing in New York?
SBJ offices. You like the background, Andrew?
There you go.
At One World Trade Center. Sports Business Journal has a Sports Business Awards that we hand out at the end of May, and we're doing the judging for those on Tuesday and on Wednesday of this week. So that's where I am. Coming up, going to dinners, going to lunches, doing some judging. You were out at dinner last night, too.
Yep, good dinner with Amazon, Tim Buckman, Harrison Raboy. Some good talk and some good food after I went to their up front, which is good. And let me just say, before we get to who's up, who's down, just know anybody who's interested in these SBJ awards, if you do not get picked, it's because of John. John's the one you should complain to. He loves it. The more complaints, the better. So if you don't get it, just know John Ourand. If you have trouble reaching him, I can give you all his numbers, his emails. I'll find his address for you if you want to.
I have the Marchand rule. Like, everything's on the record. Come on and complain, but it's all on the record.
All right, who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, Andrew, lead us off on this one.
My who's up is NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. First off, right now he has LeBron James versus Steph Curry in the second round. That should be a ratings bonanza. He's guaranteed to have one of those guys in the Western Conference Finals. It's going to be a great story when they get there. He needs one of them to get to the finals. No disrespect to Denver, who looks like they're going to advance to the Western Conference Final. But if you can get Steph or LeBron in the finals after this run, that's going to be great for them. Last Sunday, Steph's 50-pointer, 10 million viewers, nearly 10 million viewers in that Game 7, which is the most in like almost 25 years for an NBA playoff game, non-final. That's almost as good as a women's NCAA final. Which it tells you how great the women are doing in terms of their ratings for college. But for Adam Silver, with the new negotiations coming up towards the end of the year into next year, and then new rights deals coming up, this is some good timing, it looks like.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, my who's up, I'm going to go with the league commissioner as well, and it's Roger Goodell of the NFL. And that's because the NFL network went dark on Comcast systems for a couple of hours on Monday afternoon and Monday night. And what happened was that the negotiators for the NFL network and the negotiators for Comcast couldn't agree on price, and they remained far away on price. And so Comcast, the contract was up. Comcast let the channel go dark. Channel wasn't dark for more than an hour, and Roger Goodell picked up the phone, called Brian Roberts, not the former Orioles second baseman, but the head of Comcast. And these two industry titans rolled up their sleeves and got a good old-fashioned cable carriage deal done. NFL Network was on the next morning. It shows that when Roger Goodell wants to get something done, he's able to get something done. He plowed through the negotiations, and they worked out a deal. I don't know what the deal terms are yet, but the fact that NFL Network is back on Comcast and Red Zone Channel is back on Comcast shows that it was pretty serious for the league to maintain that relationship.
That's incredible that Goodell did that. I think he makes, $44 million a year. Great job for him rolling up his sleeves.
I don't know if Brian Roberts also rolled up his sleeves. He's much more
How much does he make?
Probably more than Goodell. Certainly more than Goodell. We have to look that up, actually. I don't know off the top of my head.
All right. My who's down is Mel Kiper Jr. Now, I love Mel Kiper. Okay. I loved him forever. When we talk about the draft, I'll maybe share a story. I think I saved Mel Kiper's career at one point, which is one of my highlights for me. But the TV coverage is not as critical. It's not as, the way Mel Kiper became Mel Kiper was because he was questioning the Jets draft. He was questioning the Colts draft. And he gives you analysis, but it's not that same TV. Now, do they give you good stuff? Yes, they do. And I still love watching it. ESPN Radio's coverage was hosted by Chris Carlin. It featured his ESPN Radio co-host, Chris Canty, former Jet GM Mike Tannenbaum, and they all criticized picks. Like, they just didn't say every pick was great, especially on that Raider second round, moving up to get the Notre Dame tight end. It was really good. And that you could hear it. I mean, if you listen to that opening, that sounded like old school Kiper. And so I just missed that. And I know Seth Markman, who's the producer overseeing ESPN's NFL studio shows, he talked about Kiper as a Hall of Famer, maybe. But so I love Kiper. So it's not really, it's more of like this how TV coverage is. I watched nearly all of it and listened to it on the radio. Love the draft. We'll get into that in a little bit. But my who's down is Mel Kiper Jr.
All right, let's add a topic to the pod. End of the pod, I want to hear the story about how you saved Mel Kiper's career. So we'll save it for the end. And also, I just want to add one thing. It's not just Mel Kiper. When you look at the draft, the draft used to be great because it was in New York, and Jets fans are always angry, and they hated every pick. Now, for some reason, all the fans that attend the draft, they seem to love every pick. I know. And
also, somebody's got to do a story about these people who like feel compelled to dress up, which is fine, in like their favorite Raider costume or Kansas City Chief costume, whatever it is. I mean, this one was in Kansas City. And then like they have the money to travel. I mean, I'm not saying you can't have the money to travel, but it's in the middle of the week. You're dressing up in your team. I just want to know what these people do. Like, I think it's a tremendous story. Like, I went to a Tampa Cincy game in Tampa. A lot of Bengals fans were in hand last year to see the Bengals and the Bucks. And I kind of wanted to, I was with friends, but I sort of wanted to ask all these people, like, tell me your story. Like, how are you able to just travel down here? And it seemed like they go to a lot of games. I talked to a couple of people. They go to like 4 games a year. It's like, it's expensive. They're not going to like if Amazon gets that flex schedule. I'll tell you that much. All right. Who's down for you, John?
Who's down? I am picking the anonymous producer, overnight producer for MLB.com, who on a Saturday night, when Oakland A's rookie Ryan Noda hit a home run, edited the video so the signs in the outfield that were telling A's owner John Fisher to sell the team, or calling the team president Dave Cavallo a liar, were edited out of the highlights. So if you went to MLB.com, it just looked like any other game in Oakland Stadium. What happened was that producer made a mistake. Rob Manfred has been very clear that that's not how baseball does things. This isn't an MLB mandate to sort of to strip those things out. When I talked to people at MLB, I was very heartened to hear that they included those signs on that home run clip just hours after the press came out, and it looks likely not to be done again. But I'm not going to review who did it, and I'm certainly not going to name who did it, but it is some sort of overnight producer that kind of did this by himself, and it got rectified. Good job for MLB, and hopefully that producer learned something from that.
Yeah, very positive who's down for you. It's like, well, they made a terrible mistake, but you know what? They rectified it. I was really heartened to hear that they thought their terrible mistake was not,
Well, it was just a mistake is all it was. I mean, the worry for decades about MLB Network and NFL Network is that these league-owned entities would not want to show. They would do something like that and edit that out, and so that's always been a concern. And so when you see it happen, it's like, oh no. And baseball has made it very clear since then that that's not part of what it wants to do on those highlights.
All right, I'm maybe in a mood today. I think I had a lot of coffee this morning, so just like every little comment you had, I got a comment for you. Let's keep it up though. Topic 1. The NFL, and kind of big news. I know it's better late than never if you're Fox Sports, if you're the NFL, but Nielsen messed up. I know there's some comments about Fox and like somehow it's their fault. Nielsen messed up, which is shocking. And they had the ratings wrong for the Super Bowl, and now it's the largest audience in the history of the Super Bowl for Fox Sports, which was with Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olsen after Joe Buck and Troy Aikman left. Tom Brady on deck circle. What do you think of that number? And what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? If you go, I'm going to take people behind the scenes of this pod. Nielsen almost was my who's down, because I don't know how they can put this on Fox. It was a Nielsen coding issue. Apparently what happened is that the NFL Network had a private stream that wasn't counted. I don't know how that private stream ended up adding 1 million extra viewers, but as Nielsen went in and saw the coding for that didn't work, it found other areas where the coding didn't work. Look, in terms of what we cover, this matters greatly to the networks. They really like the idea that they can set a record with this, and the fact that they couldn't boast about this right after the fact is it was disappointing. I know, to not just like the suits, the Eric Shanks and Mark Silverman and Zager, but also to people in the truck, to sort of everyday people. Last time Fox set a record with the Super Bowl in terms of viewership, they bought everybody associated with that Super Bowl crew a gift. It's going to be late in coming, but they should be looking forward to another gift again, I would think.
I hope it's not like Andrew Fergusi, their PR guru, sending them cookies with pictures of talent on it. It's something better than that kind of gift.
I gave that gift away as like within like a day of getting it. And
those
by the way, the
cookies,
person
I
who
don't
gave
know.
it to loved it.
Who loved it?
No, the person, I had a neighbor. I just gave it to a neighbor.
Oh, okay. And some people like to eat a John Smoltz pictured cookie or
Right.
a Kevin Burkhardt cookie.
Chris Mason, can we bring up some, I don't want to call this breaking news, but there's been a fluctuation in Marchand's Brady meter. Let's hear it, Chris. All right, Andrew, walk us through this. Is Tom Brady going to be doing Fox games going forward?
Well, here we go. We're a year away from when he said he's going to potentially call games with Kevin Burkhardt replacing Greg Olsen on the number one team. So next year, we know it's Burkhardt and Olsen. Then he has a 10-year, $375 million contract that he's supposed to start in the 2024-25 season. We have the Brady meter now. We're going to have to bring it out more and more. It fluctuates. Now, it was at 51% that he's going to do it to 49%. With the reasoning, it's so much money, he'll try it for a year. However, I've talked to a couple of people recently close to Brady, and I kind of feel like I'm going more 49% chance he does it, 51% chance he doesn't. I don't think he wants to travel that much. Obviously going to go private. I think Brady's a guy who, if he's in, he's all in. So he's not going to be showing up day of games like, Joe Buck and Aikman do sometimes. He's going to be there early if he's going to do it. So it's a 4-day event. Again, Crimea River for that type of money for 5.5 months. But I think, he shares his kids with Giselle. I think that's very important to him. And he can make money elsewhere. Now, 49.51. I feel like John King, is that the one on CNN?
Yeah, John King
on CNN. And
yep.
Who's our guy on NBC?
Steve Kornacki.
Yeah, Steve Kornacki. So I feel like those guys, 49.51, Brady not doing at the moment, fluctuating. So don't hold me to that. We got a year and a half before he's actually supposed to do it. A lot of time to fluctuate back. But at the moment, 49.51.
And those 2 points, those are a big 2 points because you go from over 50-50 to under 50-50.
100%. So that's the Brady meter.
I love that you name-checked Andrew Fergusi. That was my dinner date on Monday night, Fox Sports. Thank you for that. PJ Clark's, if you must know. You went, while I was doing that, to an Amazon event. What did you learn from that?
It was long. That's what first and foremost, it was long.
I knew I made the right decision, didn't I?
No, it was good. Look, I think Freebie is something that they're very interested in. But I think for our purposes, I think that Black Friday game is going to be in front of the paywall. So it's going to be available to anybody. And that could become a marquee event, especially for Amazon. kicking off the holiday shopping season officially that Friday. 3:00 game. Peter King said it very well could be Eagles Giants, which looks like that would be a very good matchup. And so I thought that was good. They had the pregame hosts, Carissa Thompson, leading they go to the way the upfront for, the people who have never been to the upfronts or what is called news fronts. They have each group talk a little bit. My biggest suggestion to all these places is just, I know everyone wants to speak. It's a big thing. It's especially for the execs. It's in front of a big crowd. It was in Lincoln Center. It's cool, but make them short, quick, get in, get out. That's what we try to do in the pod. That's what you should do on these things. So it was a little long, and we had to watch Rangers and Devils that night. Bottom line is, I think that Black Friday game is something that they're going to point to, and then we get into the flex scheduling issue. I don't know. I've talked about this before. I don't know if Amazon is so into that necessarily. Not that they don't want it. If you look at it, it probably affect one game a year, if any, and it's not going to it's going to improve a terrible game to an okay game, most likely. So for them, it's not that big a deal. I think that Goodell and company probably want it, boost those ratings, which could trigger some more money from Amazon into a playoff game. I think that's very possible. I don't know for 100%, but I think that's very possible. The reason why Goodell's so into that. Yeah, that's what I took from the Amazon event.
I find that Black Friday game to be particularly interesting. When they first started talking with the NFL about that, the idea was to have it in Las Vegas, have the Raiders Black Friday, their colors are black and silver, possibly have the Steelers black and gold come and play them. They have a road game in Vegas. And I think Amazon ended up pushing back a little bit and saying, we need a quality game to make this a big event, not like a gimmicky game of we'll just have, we'll have black, a team that's dressed in black. And so the idea that it could be like a Giants Eagles or a top NFC East matchup is something that fits in with what Amazon is envisioning for that Black Friday game, like a really high quality game that people on a Friday will be going and tuning into.
My Steelers, don't call them a gimmicky. Steelers Raiders, I get it. The Raiders might not be good, but that's not a bad game.
It's not a bad game, but it's not
it could be a bad, but it could be a bad game. That's the only problem with it.
It's like John Madden said, what's a foot? You just know, you have Giants, Eagles. That's a football game. It sounds like a football game. A game in Las Vegas, that doesn't really sound like a football game to me. All right, so I got to put my cards on the table, Andrew. I was watching the NBA playoffs. I was watching the NHL playoffs. I was watching Joey Ortiz make his major league debut with the Orioles. You were watching the NFL draft. What did you think?
All right, couple of takeaways. Mike Greenberg seemed much more comfortable third year as the host. It seemed like he belonged more. I don't know if that was as much me or it's him, but just felt like that felt more natural than it did the first couple of years. Trey Wingo was the bridge guy between Berman and Greenberg. And so that felt more natural. I said at the beginning, I'd like to see a little more critical coverage. I thought Louis Riddick, this is what he's best at. He is really good on the draft. Even when he does game analysis, he kind of does it from a player personnel point of view, where he's talking about measurables and, that's something that he needs to sort of be a little more conversational when he does as an analyst. But he's very good on the draft because he comes the closest to actually criticizing the picks. And you look at a guy like Booger McFarland. I just think about this when you look at someone's career. Booger McFarland, to me, he does that ESPN Plus analyst job, kind of the old Tom Jackson position with Chris Berman, and that's kind of like I think perfect for what he's kind of that's what he is like. I know years ago they had him as the Charles Barkley of the NFL, and that I don't see that at all. But he's like a Tom Jackson, he's very good analysis, smart analysis, but not gonna get that many things that are going to go viral. So the coverage was overall good. NFL Network, look, Daniel Jeremiah's the best guy going in terms of the most accurate, says things succinctly. And to me, he could probably be a GM in the future if he wants. I could see that in his cards. And they do a good job with it. I thought it was interesting, and I like your take on this. Why was NFL Network, you think, down though? Their ratings were down this year in terms of Nielsen. I know you're no Austin Karp, the SBJ ratings guru, but you got a take on why NFL Network went down and ESPN and ABC went up?
Yeah, we need Karp's Corner here. The most people were watching ESPN, followed by ABC, and then the NFL Network. NFL Network was the only one that showed a decrease in viewership from last year. And I don't have an actual reason for that, but I am looking at single sports channels like MLB Network, NFL Network, NHL Network, NBA TV. They're getting hurt by this cord-cutting trend worse than these other channels like ESPN that's tied to ABC and part of that Disney bundle, so they have so much more leverage there, where FS1, which is tied to the Fox broadcast network and Fox News, and that has a lot more leverage there. One thing that I want to take a look at to see is the number of homes that the NFL in decrease over the last year by the same percentage that the viewership did, because that might be a pretty quick and easy answer on that one.
Interesting. All right, my last one on the draft. This could have been my who's up. Laura Rutledge worked the draft. She's 9 months pregnant. Scouting report, gamer. I mean, that's impressive to work the draft and work all the shows that she does with the NFL Live crew, etc. And so props to her and good luck with her pregnancy, and just working at 9 months pregnant is very impressive. It will never cease to amaze me that the NFL draft, the first 3 rounds are on network TV. I know Fox did it first, then ABC, or maybe they did it the same year, but now it's ABC, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I do get the first round on broadcast TV, but yeah, that third round, I mean, who's heard of any of those names? Come on.
But they've made it such a show. It's like it's pretty incredible. It really is.
All right, topic 2. We're deep into the NBA and NHL playoffs. You had Adam Silver as who's up, and I understand why. I mean, Boston and Philadelphia. What a matchup that is. The New York Knicks are playing Miami. Any one of those go through, and Adam Silver is happy. So the East is pretty much set. And you outlined in the West too, LeBron versus Steph and one, and then Denver with Jokic, who was just so much fun to watch against the Suns. I know you gave that to Denver, but at the time of this taping, it still is only 2-0 going back to Phoenix. But then they have Kevin Durant, who's an otherworldly player as well. I think the NBA is looking so good, and I'm glad that you mentioned this in your Who's Up, because their media rights, of course, come up in 2025, a topic that we talk about all the time, and having these ratings that they're going to be getting and having these storylines that start bringing in the casual viewers is really, really going to help. And you contrast that, Andrew, to the NHL, which just lost the Boston media market. It lost the New York Rangers, the most popular team in New York City. And you have a Canadian team in there, the Maple Leafs. You have a Florida team in there. The one thing, though, about the NHL is they don't have to worry for many, many years. I think their TV deals end in 2027 with Turner and with ESPN. And so, of course, they want to be able to get big ratings. But it is much more important for the NBA, considering when its deal ends, than for the NHL, which is still at the beginning part of its deal and still trying to grow its deal. I bet you Gary Bettman is very happy to have the Canadian teams doing as well as they're doing this early in the TV deal, as opposed to the year before.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And look, it does. Last thing on this for me, and question for you, really, does it feel bigger to you on ESPN/Turner, or when it was on NBC, it felt just as big, or the same?
I don't know. That's a good question. The thing about the National Hockey League to me is that it's pretty close to baseball in being a very regional sport. And so you have regional fan bases that when their team loses, a bunch of their fans stop watching, as opposed to like the NBA, you still watch the stars sort of moving forward. And so on NBC, the Washington Capitals were where I live, they would have the best record in the league. They would have, playoff runs. They won the Stanley Cup. They had Alex Ovechkin. So it felt bigger to me just because of the market that I was in. But I would suspect to you, having the Rangers and the Devils and it feels, at least just as big, if not bigger right now, right?
The first round did, because you had Devils, Rangers, you had Islanders in the playoffs as well. And so, a lot of it is what we're doing on the back pages and also what's being talked about on WFAN and ESPN New York. And hockey's not really the main topic, right? The Yankees and Mets are, number one along with football. Hockey kind of regular season, you're not going to get that much hockey on radio we cover it every day, of course, but it's not getting the back page unless they make a huge trade or something happens really significant. But it did seem like, along with the Knicks right now, the center stage, and that's good for the Yankees because they're doing terrible, which you're liking, I'm sure. A great point you made is hockey is sort of like baseball. It's a national sport, but really the interest is regional. And I think you're right. Once the teams drop off, certain fan bases, they don't just stay with it like maybe the NBA and definitely with the NFL.
Topic 3, Andrew. Last week on this pod, we spent a lot of time talking about ESPN and the layoffs that hit ESPN. We talked about Mike Soltis. We talked about the head communications executive over there. We talked about Russell Wolf, who has been there for a long time and ran ESPN Plus for a long time. But after we taped our pod, some more names came out that hit one specific part of their business. Why don't we take that?
Yeah, so this exactly. So we would be remiss. We've talked about this. I've written about it, just the de-emphasis on ESPN Radio, even though I gave them props for their coverage of the draft. They really hit it hard locally with program directors, both in New York and LA, a bunch of national people as well. And that's what we talk about. That's why it's tough and like the earth sort of moves, because you could be doing a good job for 25 years. And then, it's decided, which is their business decision, understandable in terms of, for the business, that, hey, we're not going to value radio as much. And so those 25 years don't mean anything at that point. So that makes it difficult if you work there. And I heard a lot of feedback from people from ESPN in terms of, that's the right tone because that's how they feel. But the radio part of it, and when you're looking forward, like where, the future, I think that's a little, they're going to have radio. I mean, they're going to have a core group. They're going to have national shows. And they still have interest in New York, especially Michael Kay, who does afternoons, has got a big new contract to do a few more years on the radio. He was thinking about retiring. This kind of was starting a couple of years ago when they changed from ESPN radio to ESPN audio. So there's more of an emphasis on the podcast game, even though they were a little bit late to podcasts. They could have probably had Bill Simmons running something like he, created with the Ringer if they'd gone that direction, which they probably would have been better. But at that point, ESPN wasn't that interested in doubles and triples and only really wanted home runs. So if something didn't make, something with a B or hundreds of millions of dollars, like, we're not really that interested in it. And I think looking back, when you look at the local sites, which I was a part of, and what's going on, like with the Athletic, for example, I think they would have been better positioned if they said, if we're a business that's making 10, 20 million, let's add those singles and doubles up, to make up for, which ended up being cord cutting. And, instead of a couple of $1 billion a month or whatever it was, now it's a little less than $1 billion a month in terms of cable fees. And that's probably going down. It'd be better to have those doubles and singles. So for radio, that was tough to see in terms of it got hit pretty hard.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize this one more time. We're going to be talking about this again in 1 month because in June there's another round of layoffs. The idea that they're spreading this across, several months, it's just something that still makes me scratch my head, Andrew.
Yeah, so we'll be returning to that. All right, let's do some quick hitters before we get out of here. Suns deal and the Mercury local broadcast rights. John, you're all over that story. What's your take on this and what it means for the future?
My take on this, Andrew, is that Semaphore Media was talking about this deal. This is a deal that went well beyond the local market and went well beyond sports media. Gray Television and Kiswe are going to share the rights and broadcast Suns games over broadcast TV and stream them on the Suns and the Mercury's websites as well and their app. And this is the first move that a team has made to go away from an RSN. And it seems like a really big deal. First of all, it's good to be a billionaire, and you have a billionaire owner that can say no to the next 2 years of rights fees that Diamond Sports would have paid, or whatever RSN is in that market would have paid them, which a lot of other team owners really want to have. But to me, everything that Rob Manfred and Adam Silver have been saying about the RSNs moving forward is going to look like what this deal is. Nothing is going to be exclusive. So Gray Television bought the rights for their stations in the Arizona markets, and they're going to share those rights also with Kiswe, which is going to stream them via the websites and the app. And I bet you that it's non-exclusive to such an extent that they can also sell them in 2025 to ESPN for ESPN Plus, or Turner for Max, or NBC for Peacock. And so the big takeaway that people should take from this is that rights locally are going to be non-exclusive. So you'll be able to see this in a lot more places, and the revenue coming in to the teams is going to drop dramatically.
I just want to say, just to emphasize, great point about it being great to be a billionaire. That is good
That's
stuff.
why people listen to this podcast. Yes.
I don't know what's wrong with me today. Maybe this is every week. All right, next topic, NASCAR. You had some reporting on this as well. I've heard some things about it too, in terms of, pretty good chance of Fox and NBC getting a deal. And then, I kind of heard Amazon is the digital player potentially, but there's, it's an open market. What do you see happening? What do you know?
Fox, NBC are the incumbent broadcasters right now. The exclusive negotiating window that they had by their contract with NASCAR, it ended on Monday. And on Monday and on Tuesday, NASCAR had a series of meetings with Apple TV Plus, with Amazon, with Google YouTube, with a lot of digital streamers out there. So what's going to happen moving forward is you're going to have most likely a first half of the year on Fox, as is, the last half of the year on NBC, and in the middle, these midsummer races, they're going to try to get these to a streamer, and they want it to be exclusive, and it's going to go to one streamer. If I had to guess, I would also guess that Amazon is in the driver's seat to pick these up, but they're talking to everybody, and they expected deals to at least have handshakes on these deals toward the end of June.
Hopefully it's not a Pac-12 type deadline.
The movable deadline.
Exactly. The moving line. All right.
Coming up this weekend, we got the Run for the Roses, Kentucky Derby. You bet on the Kentucky Derby, Andrew?
I'm not a big betting guy. Maybe I'll get a account soon, but I've never really been a big betting guy. So I don't. You do?
Oh no, I just do it with the family. We all pick our horses in the.
Oh yeah, I've done that before. Yeah, I've done that before. I thought you meant like placing a bet on like FanDuel or something, or DraftKings. Yeah, Kentucky Derby this weekend. The interesting point about the coverage is NBC/Peacock are gonna be on for 7.5 hours. That's like more than a Super Bowl in terms of a pregame, and then I guess when you count the actual Super Bowl, it'll be longer, with the actual game being a little longer. But it shows how you can super serve and how they're able, it comes down to advertising. Like, they're not doing this unless they can sell this. But there's a lot of pageantry with the Kentucky Derby. And so they're going all in for 7.5 hours of coverage. It's a niche sport, but the Kentucky Derby is not a niche event, right? It's the granddaddy. They have never done that before in terms of that length of time. So interesting thing that NBC's decided to do with that, and with the broadcast and with Peacock.
Yeah, it does make sense. Also, because the Kentucky Derby, as you know, is not just one race; it's a whole day of races at the track. So I'm sure they'll be, showing that those races as well as they lead into the big one.
100%.
All right, Andrew. Before we go, the last topic: you saved Mel Kiper's career. I gotta hear this. Did you write something nice about him? What happened?
I don't know. I'd have to look up exactly when it was, but it must have been early 2000. It definitely was the early 2000s. What year, I'm not positive on. And I got Mark Shapiro on the phone. He was the head of ESPN making the decisions, and ESPN and Kuiper were in a really heated contract negotiation. And Shapiro said on the record that they're done. Mel Kiper is done at ESPN. Okay. So I call up, I had Kuiper's number. I call up Kuiper. And I said, Mel, I just got off the phone with Mark Shapiro. He said that contract negotiations are over, that, you're not taking, there's a big disagreement about how many appearances you need to make on like ESPN Radio, because it does become endless. If you start doing those, you have to say yes to all of them. I think he wanted to limit. That was part of it. I'm sure there's some financial things as well. Anyways, Kuiper was represented, at least at that time, by his wife. And so I get on the phone with him. I felt like, I tell him this news, which obviously is a little bit awkward, but I, wanted to give him a chance to say whatever he wanted to say. And he called for his wife. And at that point, I didn't know his wife was his agent. So it was just sort of weird. Like I'm talking to Mel Kiper, and he's like, whatever his wife's name. He's like, so she picked up, and so we talked, and she said, we don't know about this, yada, yada. So that's like on like a Thursday or Friday that comes out. Rudy Martzke on Monday writes something because there was like an uproar. Like people were calling into ESPN. They wanted Mel Kiper to stay. Martzke wrote something in USA Today, and Shapiro reversed it. He kept Kiper. And Mel Kiper now, Seth Markman, the producer on the NFL studio show, says he should be in the Hall of Fame. Now, he might have ended up on NFL Network. Mel Kiper is an institution, but I think I quasi saved his job.
If Mel Kiper goes into the Hall of Fame, you better be on that dais with him. Maybe not introducing him, but you better be on that dais.
I remember when Shapiro told me that. He was like, you hear things, and you're like, whoa, all right. I wasn't, this is a big story. And I don't see it. Like, I would get rid of Mel Kiper. But now he's, obviously not going anywhere. 40 years he's been doing that. So props to Mel Kiper. Got my who's down, but overall who's up. I'm not sure Hall of Fame. I have to think about that, if he's a Hall of Famer or not.
Yeah, I have no opinion on the Hall of Fame. But it brings us to the end of another episode of the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to Chris Mason for the for producing, AC Wyatt as well. Please like and subscribe. Andrew, I got to tell you that Apple Podcast comments, we have Big Benelli, who says very clearly, more Orioles. People are clamoring. They want more Orioles talk. Thank you, Big Benelli. I'll try to do it.
Yeah, with that, we need some out cues. See you, everybody.
And Andrew, we'll talk NFL, ESPN, MLB, NASCAR, and more on the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast.
Can I do it one more time? Just the end. You just seemed a little unsure what this podcast is called.
I know. Did you pick up on that? I thought I baked it well.